Just to kick things off here, this is part of the Integrated series. Integrated is focused on just general topics in blockchain, all the way from kind of higher and broader topics like blockchain project evaluation, all the way down to even very particular topics like automated market makers, to decentralized exchanges, and then everything else in between. So before we get started, want to, Gary, since you're on the mic, would love for you to give a quick intro, and then we can go to John.
Hey everyone, my name's Gary Tan. I'm a venture capitalist by day, but I guess my current claim to fame is that I was one of the first, actually I was helped them get into Y Combinator, so I think that counts as a first investor on the YC side, and then I actually also kicked off their seed round before demo day. And so, for my fund initialized capital, we were able to invest at 15 cents per share, and I think Coinbase is up and down, $240 a share or so today. And what we really love to do is invest in companies at the very earliest possible stage. And when we met Brian Armstrong, it really was just him and a demo for bitbank.is. And aside from that, I big fan of just crypto space in general. I think that we're talking about a global world computer, and I think that there are going to be so many ways that this touches absolutely every person on the planet. We are sort of first pitch of the first inning still on what this technology can and will be for society.
Excellent. Thank you, Gary. And I can't express how excited I am to be on this call with you, Gary. I mean, your background and your track record is just so impressive. You started out, in large tech firms as an early employees. You were your own entrepreneur and starting companies, and you had successful exits. And then you actually have been a very successful venture capitalist, as you just noted. My background, I'm president of Ava Labs. I actually went the other way. I was a tech investor at some places like Tiger and Kingdon and ran my own fund, and then I became an operator. So I can't wait to share experiences and hear how Gary approaches different projects, not just necessarily on the blockchain, but also how he looks at different types of investments in different fields, and how he got into why he chose Coinbase early. Because there's a lot of parallels with how we are doing things. Avalanche has ecosystem capability, and we are looking at a ton of good projects, and we have our own, call it scorecard, as to what we're looking at. So love to share notes and compare.
Yeah, I'm excited. This is going to be great.
So I think what we can do is maybe kick the conversation off in maybe a general framework, both with John and Gary. We can start, whoever has an answer here, but perhaps what would be the best way to evaluate blockchain projects in your perspective? What is kind of the number one thing you look out for? If it's not singular to just one, perhaps a few is totally fine as well.
Gosh, I mean, we fund a lot of companies that are not crypto too, so really, really excited about things like EasyPost or Algolia, which are all great startups that are key parts of just like the internet infrastructure in terms of cloud infrastructure, just things that help developers become a lot more powerful. And I think I actually think about especially sort of these computer chain, the compute chains end up really being about what helps a developer be hyper powerful, and so I think number one to me is quality of API and developer experience, and then number two is probably that big thing that is somewhat of still a pretty significant impediment to the crypto landscape, which is how do we move beyond just proof of work. And I think that's where Avalanche really, really shines.
Yeah, thanks, Gary. Very similarly, especially when we're looking at earlier projects, We want to see the experience of the developers, or even if they're not developers, their experience and track record of success in something they've done. Not necessarily in this venture because it's probably very early. That's the first thing we'll look at. And then we look at literally the proposed business, whether it is something that will have the network effects that can really help it grow fast, what kind of market opportunity and what kind of product that they're trying to develop in terms of what they're trying to do in terms of helping the Avalanche ecosystem, because there are certain things that may be great, but not necessary for the Avalanche ecosystem. So we have the benefit of thinking strategically for helping the Avalanche ecosystem. I think one thing that's similar to what Gary looks at in terms of early stage things, and which is very unique. I think I applaud him for this because although he's a venture capitalist now, he used to be an operator. And one thing we look at when we take on projects is not just what money we can give them, but how can we help them and make them better? Because then we're partners and it becomes so much more fun and everyone becomes more successful.
And
yeah,
I think
community is key, isn't it? I mean, what can you get done with more people? It's like, if you want to go fast, you go alone. But if you want to go far, you got to go together.
That's right.
And
Actually, people will find you actually go faster when you work together.
Gary, building off of what you were mentioning with developer-focused evaluations, I think one of the fascinating things about the blockchain space is there's so many different customer bases. Even within the developer cohort, there's enterprises that are trying to figure out permission deployments. On the exact opposite side, you have movements like the decentralized finance movement. Also, just the permissionless nature of things lead to a lot of people who really like the open and truly permissionless environment that the blockchain can pretty much cultivate with, of course, the community layer on top. So with that being said, I think there are plenty of different audience segments that need to be captured. Do you think that with the developer first focus, kind of like how you saw in the Web 2 space, especially with the app stores and all of these new application marketplaces that started popping up, do you think it's kind of a strong long-term strategy to be focused on just the developers and developers only, kind of like Steve Ballmer would, or do you think we're kind of facing a new environment where there's likely multiple types of audience segments that we have to be focusing on?
Well, I guess it's what's interesting. I think. Well, my view is like there's really these three phases to crypto. The first phase is like very far along. If gold is like on the order of $10 trillion worth of value, crypto is around 2. So maybe we're 20% of the way to full replacement of gold for that first theme, for store of value. And I think the mistake that people make is they look at that and say like, oh, crypto's almost done. Like it's just inevitable. Like all the things that can be made will be made. And I think that store of value is really, it's a fantastic use case. It is the one that is driving all of the speculation and all of the sort of perceived value of crypto today. But if you told me now, if you time traveled back to 2012 and told me when I was investing in Coinbase that like Bitcoin would be worth $40,000 or $50,000, I would say you're smoking crack. That's not going to happen. So I don't know. That's like the first part. I think the second part is really about DeFi and really that's like sort of the crypto converted. Like there are people who already have a lot of their net worth in crypto and then say they don't want to take that wealth out. And so they are participating in both centralized and decentralized versions of lending it out so that they can use it for other things or for other types of speculation. And so I think DeFi today is sort of preaching to the choir. And what the Ethereum world has done, going from 1 billion to 80 billion in less than a year, that's crazy. I mean, when do you have something that grows 80x in a single year? Like I think you have to sort of pay attention to that and say DeFi is not going away. and it is sort of like that second act. But even then, it's still only the crypto converted. And for us to actually get to the third act, which I would say is truly decentralized services that start, maybe displacing that of what is like truly, truly centralized today. Facebook is $1 trillion business, like BitClout as a brand new thing. Like I have no idea whether BitClout is actually going to be the true manifestation of like the Facebook/Twitter replacement, but I do know at the very least it is probably 6 degrees, which is the first inspiration of that next generation, that this idea is worth it, it can work, it is interesting, pay attention to these dynamics. And so, that's where what you're saying really comes to the fore, because we don't have good UI. Like we don't have easy, like, just really solid ways to do custody quite yet, right? MetaMask is dominant, but not that good yet, right? And then every single, Ethereum killer, frankly, needs something that is not, and they often do not even have something that is even remotely as good as MetaMask, and MetaMask is not enough. So we're still in this insane infrastructure phase of how do we even move beyond preaching to the choir? And I think we're starting to see it, though. It's like the building blocks are here. And so if a couple years ago we were like 1993, sitting on our 14.4 modems trying to, literally just trying to get telnet access to a Unix terminal to get on the internet. I think that we're still waiting for where's the web browser moment? When do I get Trumpet WinSock, and when do I actually get a true TCP/IP connection to my desktop machine? When do I get broadband? When do I get Netscape? All of these things we have to look forward to, actually.
Wow, you're so young, but you know what Telnet is. It surprises me, but that's awesome. I remember first.
Hey man, I'm 40, so I don't know how young that is, but I definitely was like into computers back when I was 12, 13. So.
Well, the first time I saw Telnet was at my undergrad, and I was in the engineering quad, and saw all these guys. We were on the East Coast talking to guys on the West Coast via Telnet thing called email. I was like, whoa, that
brand
blew
new.
my mind. Yeah, but similar to Gary, I have my own way and framework here, and I also think of 3 waves or 3 stages. And the first stage was definitely Bitcoin. It showed us what store of value was, and a digital store of value in the form of Bitcoin. But I think the way I look at wave 2, which is Ethereum having that programmability, the smart contract, and then applications started developing on it. That was the beginning of very cool and ecosystems. And then now we're seeing DeFi and get created on over $100 billion of value now in DeFi. We have NFTs, so there's real utility happening on it. However, I wouldn't consider the ecosystems of wave 2 as economies. And I think because you can't have an economy unless transactions can be done on scale and have low latency, and the costs are not prohibitive. This is what's happened, I think, in what I call wave 3 of crypto. You have first layer blockchains like Avalanche, who happen to be Ethereum compatible, so developers can program in Solidity with ease, just like they do in Ethereum. But suddenly they have different features, and there is instant finality, and the costs are not prohibitive. So a lot of what could possibly be helpful in growing what I call an economy suddenly is possible. And I think that's what wave 3 is. And I agree with Gary. I would normally have said wave 4 would have been further bringing traditional capital into, but there's such great growth in this space. I think wave 3 has also involved the enablers. I don't know how you think about Coinbase, but I think Coinbase is one of the best enablers out there. If you look at the amount of AUM that's now custodied by what I call TradFi type people that I used to work with at traditional finance places are now getting involved it is fantastic in getting people and assets into this ecosystem and growing at the same time as the economy is growing.
John, as you know, as a former TradFi person, I wonder how you think. I mean, I've been talking with some friends who are, they were, old hedge funders at like sort of the Citadels and Rentex and stuff, and they're telling me like, hey, you should watch out for replacement of all the pink sheets. I mean, Bloomberg makes so much money off of. I mean, it's still just like this huge market lying in plain sight. Like that seems like security tokens should just come and wipe that stuff away. Like, when's that going to happen? What's your take on that?
Well, so there's two things there. I think the security token phenomenon is starting to happen. I think the first wave, and before I was president of Ava Labs, I was CEO of the digital assets group at Shares Post. Shares Post was a secondary marketplace for private securities. Back then, private securities were the Ubers and the Lyfts. They're all public companies. But it was kind of hard because I don't think the world was ready for it from a commercial perspective. I think finally we're getting to a place where the world is starting to is ready for the security token. There are new things like Reg A+. Reg A+ was very new back then, but now there are definitely companies out there wanting to do a raise in the US in a compliant way. And we are actually talking to one that's taking advantage of Reg A+, trying to raise $75 million. They have great cash flows. They're also what I would call enablers, similar to how Coinbase or a BitGo is. They allow traditional people from either a qualified custodian side or great wallets that interface in an easier way with traditional people to use it and to get access to crypto. But the point is they need to raise at least 50 million and hopefully 75 million. And Reg A+ allows you to market it towards regular individuals. I mean, we're talking about hundreds of thousands, if not 200,000 or 300,000 crowdfund in a compliant Reg A+ way on a security token, minting those tokens on a blockchain so that you can have the same benefits that an ICO did back in 2017.
Yeah.
That is incredible.
If like security tokens replace all of the stock market, do you think we would ever have sort of a GameStop, you can't trade this anymore on Robinhood sort of moment ever again?
No, but that's why I'm in here. It's so great. Like in theory, you're part of that governance, right? So when Robinhood suddenly decides to change the terms of agreement arbitrarily because maybe they have issues on themselves, at least you see that, you kind of have a vote and you self-custody your stuff. So in theory, you can at least gain some visibility of that, remove your GameStop and bring it over to Schwab and trade at Schwab.
Move the token wherever you need to go.
Exactly, that would be the
freedom.
Dream. Exactly.
It's financial freedom.
Empowering financial freedom to every individual, giving them self-governance, and frankly, it's the same thing on the social media stuff, in my opinion. Like, I was an investor in these social media companies in the early days, and I thought in those early days they created great new service in terms of giving us cool things to do, whether it's 140 something characters and broadcasting our feelings and views out there, to creating connections and taking advantage of this great network of people just bonding together. We didn't realize we're trading off something for that efficiency and entertainment value. We're trading off our personal data. And then it got to the point where these companies were now using that data in order to supposedly optimize our experience. And when it's the point where like, okay, maybe if they know my habits and they want to show me things that I may want to buy or show me stories that I may want to read a little quicker, that's still useful and there's utility there. But I think we definitely have crossed the Rubicon from that. And these big behemoths now are using our data and actually manipulating us. I think it's so sad how this world is so angry at each other, and that's because anger is the easiest thing to trigger. So besides that, I can't even have access to my own PII, and they make money off of me. Like, why can't I contribute to my own PII and then own it?
And the thing is, you're also totally subject to their opacity when it comes to policies, and like sometimes it's a bug. There's like sort of deniability. I don't know if you were following this weekend, but search actually broke on Amazon, And then there was an interesting whole wave of speculation. Sort of the first wave was like, they took down C.S. Lewis's Mere Christianity. They're anti-Christian. And then some other people were like, they took off Chaos Monkeys. Like, I'm mad about that. And so it was interesting to watch that and then realizing, oh, this is actually a code bug. And then the most interesting observation I think someone had in my mentions was this might actually be how they show the publishers they have control.
Yeah.
So if people cannot find entire books from certain publishers just for a few hours per day, and it's totally deniable, oh, it was a code bug, right? You can imagine a report that comes out, gets sent to the publisher and says, hey, you should join our preferred rewards program. There's some be a sponsored listing because some bad things, you have a great spot on that bestseller list. It would be a shame for something to happen to you. And I think that's we know we're all capitalists here, so it's like on the one hand, like pricing power like that is like sort of the spoil of the victor of a given market. But that's the cool thing about crypto is that if we have a decentralized world, like we can actually make choices and we can choose someone else, right?
You just said it. I mean, that's what decentralized blockchain crypto is all about. Basically giving us all choice.
Yeah, that's exciting. But and then the only other tricky thing though is like obviously we've been talking about this through like multiple cycles now, and one thing that really strikes me though is if someone is going to commit to working on a blockchain or cryptocurrency project, they better be willing to just like ignore all the haters and have like an internal fuel and fire that is like truly and absolutely unquenchable. Like I think Goon has this, and it's like really cool to see how he engages with people on the internet. 'Cause, honestly, crypto is like the most religious thing there is. It's like you're actually, I think it's like a form of actually trying to mint a religion, and then you have to have like just total belief, and then only then will other people have total belief, and that maintains your total belief. And then 10 years later, you get to the promised land. It's pretty wild.
That is just a great point. I mean, I can tell you firsthand, Gun has such high conviction, and we believe in everything we're doing at Ava Labs and the things that are going on in Avalanche. And when we look at entrepreneurs that we want to help, we are looking for people who believe in what they do as much as we believe in what we're doing.
So, quick follow-up, actually, Gary. You mentioned the idea of preaching to the choir. What do you think? I know there are a lot of different narratives going on, and I think we've repeated cycles, especially in the previous bull market, and also the one that came before that, and then, of course, all the other ones that came right all the way up to the creation of Bitcoin. But in our space, there's so many different narratives. And I think both of you guys actually alluded to the idea of like, I think we just need to find that real idea that's going to come through the surface, kind of like the browser that's usable and not just this hobbyist MetaMask that people are kind of tinkering with still. What do you think is the most promising narrative that you're seeing in the space, and how does this, if at all, relate to some of the things you've seen perhaps in Web 2 or even NBC, things like that?
Interesting. I mean, I have to still say DeFi is like sort of like the true bright spot of something moving beyond just. Yeah, I mean, I think it is interesting to watch how the crypto evolution also, early on is a little bit driven by, hey, I have this hammer and where do I find the nail? And then I think DeFi is like sort of the perfect nail that at least the Ethereum community has found. And then the hard part is like, I don't think that they have a monopoly on it. I think that Ethereum is showing like deep community, and it's pretty awesome to watch, but it's still honestly anyone's game. I think that's what I'm really looking for. Like can you catch the developers, and then can you catch ultimately the end users? And that it's still too early to tell. Like, I think Ethereum has a lead, but who really knows actually beyond that? I'm curious how you guys look at it.
Well, I think they definitely have an ecosystem lead, maybe not a technology lead.
Yeah, that's right.
They're working on ETH 2.0, but that's
the ecosystem is big,
Yes,
but
correct.
it also, well, it's like we said earlier, right? If you want to go fast, go alone. But if you want to go far, you need to go together. And so then the war
Yep.
is, how do you keep building your community so that it can actually rival that of even Ethereum's?
Yeah, well, I mean, I know how we're doing it. There's three ways that's happening. I think there's one is just simply very organic. What I mean by that is there are certain features and certain functions of the Avalanche platform that allow developers to do certain things that they can't do elsewhere. Another way that it's happening is even with some great potential first layers, there are still very few that are actually live and going. So that's the second way. Like others who go to, third party, well, not third party, they go to first layer blockchains that have great potential but are not live. They're going to go to the ones that are live, and Avalanche is one of them that is live. The last thing is building connectivity. I think we are going to be more and more interoperable, different chains. The Avalanche Ethereum has an AEB, Avalanche Ethereum bridge, over $1.2 billion worth in 2 or 3 months now, has traveled
awesome.
back and forth. So it's cool. It's kind of like, you like Manhattan, it's congested, it's very expensive to go get a beer at a bar. So you drive to Williamsburg and then you have a different hip, fun scene, different types of people, and it's probably a little cheaper. You have a great time, and if you want, you can go back, or you can stay in Williamsburg for a period of time.
I thought Williamsburg got more expensive than Manhattan.
Actually, you're on a per unit basis. I think it is more expensive. You're right.
It's more popular though too. Yeah. So that's something.
Well, I don't know if it's more popular on pure numbers, but it definitely is more popular with some people. That's for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a great example of. I don't think it's a single chain world. It's funny. There's, one of the earliest crypto funds I got involved with was actually Polychain Capital. Meeting Olaf right when he quit his job at Coinbase was really a powerful moment because, he sort of opened my eyes up to this idea of it's embedded in the name of their fund, Polychain.
Yeah.
Just literally, it's not. I think everyone was so Bitcoin maximalist even back then. And it was nasty. I mean, it's still a little bit nasty. It's boggles my mind how nasty the arguments are. And, people sort of fight dirty in terms of these religions going up against each other. So I'm definitely not a maximalist.
Very tribal. Very tribal. Yeah. That's unbelievable.
I mean, I guess, when you're fighting for hearts and minds, that's what it takes, actually. But, I do think it'll be a multi-chain world and a polychain world. And I think that having those types of bridges is really, really smart, actually.
That's right.
It's really about how do you bring users and liquidity into any ecosystem.
So I guess then we're currently talking about layer ones and kind of the ecosystems that it facilitates, maybe switching just slightly towards more specificity, wondering if there are killer applications or tools that you're seeing, perhaps even on the developer side, at least on your side, Gary, as that's kind of the barometer for success within a tech space, especially a nascent one like blockchain. If there's something that has caught your mind in the last few months, curious as to what that is and why.
I guess. What's funny is I spend a lot more time looking at, traditional, just IDE and tools like that than per se dev tools on the crypto side.
Or maybe broadly, just in applications in general, just to broaden it.
Gosh, I mean, anything that makes a developer feel more powerful is really that. I think that's one of the patterns that we've seen. I remember using Algolia, for instance, which is a cloud-hosted search provider. And when I was working on Posterous, I had to build search from scratch, and I built it using Sphinx, and I did it using Lucene from scratch, and I've built different types of search servers and maintained them over the years, and they were such disasters, and I never wanted to work on it, but I always had to. And the second I saw a super clean hosted version with like idiomatic libraries for both JavaScript and Ruby, I was in love. I was like, this is the best thing I've ever seen, and I've used it on like 3 other projects since, and I tell everyone I know about it. Because if you've ever had to deal with search servers, like it's like such a powerful thing, actually.
So on the, now maybe not a tool for devs, but if I use the Web 2.0 examples, I remember back in the day when if you wanted a website, you had to go to this like third-party consulting firm. They came in, they charge you hundreds of thousands of dollars. Then they created this clunky website with all these lines of code. And then all of a sudden, like 10 years later, there are companies like Wix and Shopify that allow you to just drag and drop these things easily, and then create your own website with better functionality and a lot lower costs than the early days. I think right now, if we continue with this narrative, this theme, we are just in the beginning of finding great companies. I'm talking to a few companies that are trying to turn that MetaMask into that experience that's more similar to Wix, where people can just easily figure things out and make it simple. I know the big players in the traditional world, like a PayPal, they've made a huge effort for their 360 million users to basically have crypto embedded into the similar wallet experience that they have, whether it's Venmo or PayPal or whatever. But they're underneath the hood, and with what they're doing is very, very complicated. They're relying on a lot of partnerships and companies they've actually bought from the crypto space to do it. It's still not easy. Whereas if you look at Wix, sure, it's easy to the user, but it's also nice and smooth underneath. I think we're just in the beginning of finding great companies who are transforming MetaMask, so to speak, into like the most usable wallet by anyone's standards.
Yeah, and you know what? I think there's a lot on the crypto infrastructure space that we're just like sort of scratching the surface on. We were the first investors in Bison Trails, which sold to Coinbase at the end of last year.
Nice.
And I don't know. I think the crazy thing that people is like, it's sort of like underreported is like, if you factor in the IPO price, it was actually $1 billion exit, which is insane.
Wow.
And the space is continuing to heat up. There's sort of Stake and a ton of other players. I think there's the founders of Down to Lunch like pivoted into the space, and raised hundreds of millions. So the game is still afoot. If you're going to have a proof of stake chain and you're going to be a corporation that somehow like participates on those things, you're going to need hosting services, right? And it's like obviously Coinbase now has Bison Trails, and that I think of it as almost like Amazon started with book selling, but it ended up adding AWS later. That's the crazy thing about some of these companies. I don't know. I think one of the more interesting things that I found out about the Facebook IPO was that the smartest people to actually work for Facebook, John Jay, when do you think they joined Facebook? Was it at the beginning, pre-IPO, or post-IPO?
That's a trick question. I'm gonna guess post-IPO just based on the way you've
sorry about that.
Yeah, you were leading it.
I let it anyway. Sorry, I gave it away.
Okay.
But I mean, that was surprising as hell for me, honestly, because
actually that's not surprising because I mean, Facebook, when they IPO'd, was a web-based business, and most of their revenues came from Zynga. They kind of really got lucky that mobile and the iPhone and the smartphone really took off, and that's what really turned their company around. So then success begets success. So when they saw the potential for it, great people, intellectual capital will flock to things that are moving in the right direction.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that's just as every cryptocurrency is a cult, every startup is actually a cult. And then, it's just very counterintuitive for me because, I was first 10 at Palantir, love helping people start companies right when they're like 1 or 2 people. So, And my favorite thing is to actually help them believe in their idea even before they believe it in it themselves. And I usually do that by just telling them point blank that now you've convinced me and I believe, and I've believed in a lot of good things. And somehow that helps the founders so much that they start hiring people and raising money. And so that's one of the weird, interesting effects of being a VC. It's like,
Yeah, when the right people bless you, gives a lot of confidence. It becomes self-fulfilling. I agree with that.
when you believe in them, you're just saying it, you know. You have
That's
to actually
right.
believe it in order to actually have it incept someone into being able to do the things that are necessary to build a dominant business. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, I guess my point was, holy crap, like Coinbase becoming a public company, they are now hiring and bringing on a set of people that is like sort of next level smart. And now I realize like that's sort of the end game of every cult is becoming a religion.
Yeah, that's a great point. Well, I wouldn't call the early guys not smart or not smart ass. I just think
No,
they're
not at
different.
all.
They're just different in the way they think. They're probably more visionary and better at certain things, whereas these new people have more experience in managing large-scale businesses and have different mechanisms. That's kind of what
someone who could be a 4-star general for
Yeah,
you know,
exactly.
a platoon, or sorry, a whole army, a whole section of the army is very different than the commando who's gonna be there on day zero.
That's right. And frankly, sometimes that's what the board or the venture capitalist is there to do, because certain founders, visionaries, have the ability to transform themselves from early days, hyper growth, and then manage growth to cash flow, steady company. But not all can do that. And sometimes you need that board to come in and help rejigger things so that the life of the company can continue to grow properly.
Yeah. Can I turn it on you guys and ask you, like, what's it like to be running, one of the biggest top, like, cryptocurrencies in the world at this point? I think that we got to know each other back when you were even unlaunched, and but now that you're here, and like you're not done by any means, but how does it feel? Like, what's the most surprising thing about being where you're at on the CoinMarketCap list?
Great question. I mean, first of all, we feel very blessed to be working on a mission. I think you and I, Gary, have talked about this. I think we're very similar in the sense that part of the underlying reason why we do all this is to create more access to people, and financially speaking, empowering them, giving them the ability to make their own decisions. That's what all blockchain is about, and that's why we all started doing this first and foremost. But what is really exciting to me is I feel like, yes, there's been a decent amount done in the last year and a half, but I still feel like there's like nothing that's been done. We've got $100 billion, a little more, trapped in DeFi, but there's like $760 trillion of real world assets that sit on financial balance sheets and financial services companies.
CeFi.
All of that stuff is going to be put on chain. And that's really when I will feel like, wow, we're making real dents. You talked about it earlier, like, we're 2 trillion market cap, and about 45% is digital gold in the form of Bitcoin. Gold is still 9 trillion. So there's a ton of work to be done. And, but it's exciting to be part of this. And I just feel like it's still so early.
I think one of the things that I see mainly from my side, especially with a marketing background, is trying to sift through all of the narratives and kind of again, what you said earlier, Gary, about preaching to the choir. There's so many people and groups preaching, but then how do you figure out what truly is that signal that leads to the user-friendly browser, or kind of like the catalyst moment within the iOS App Store beyond just like that trinket lighter app or like the beer drinking app where you kind of tilt it backwards and you pretend that you're drinking a beer. Like, I feel like we're very much at that stage. And with this year and actually even the last couple of years, we've seen so many different narratives, and they're still persisting. NFTs, and then NFTs get unpackaged in a million different ways. You also have DeFi, which then gets unpackaged in a million different ways. And then I think the list goes on, and ultimately, how do you best focus on one thing and talk to people in general about why that one piece of innovation or that sector is so important, and then make sure that you have conviction in that lane. And you could potentially be picking the wrong quote-unquote lane that doesn't necessarily succeed in the end. So I think that's kind of the most interesting part. Even though we've made a lot of progress as Avalabs and a team building a Avalanche platform, I think there's still so many different things that we're still trying to maneuver around, and that's kind of one of the main things that come to my mind.
So I think that's a hard thing to answer, Jay.
Yeah.
Because most traditional startups in Silicon Valley start out probably identifying a specific problem, and they feel like they have a solution to solve it. And the whole company grows on that one little thing that they're trying to solve. Whereas most people who go into blockchain and crypto, they're trying to rip out an entire system. Like literally what I just said. I want $760 trillion of financial assets around the world on chain one day. That means I have to rip out everything that exists. It's not solving 2-day settlements to one day. It is like ripping the whole thing out. That's the big dream. So, and then the second thing is, where do you get the metrics? Like, I'll turn this question around on you, Jay. Like, if you were working at a traditional startup, you can find out exactly what demographic you're targeting. You can figure out how much you need to spend. You have customer acquisition costs and you have a lifetime value of a customer, and you can figure out if you're making the right decision because you take that data and you do a return on the money you spent. How do you do this here?
Right, and I think that's kind of the million-dollar question, at least for us, is trying to narrow down the uncertainty with as much data as possible, while also being very cognizant about kind of the climate that we're in terms of privacy and data.
Yeah. Dude, I mean, so for people who are listening right now, like what you guys just described is a real problem that one of the top chains has, and if you solve that problem for them, it could be $1 billion startup of its own. And that's how you can actually find new markets and create them before they get created. It's actually by identifying the problem that you just described just now.
Yeah, exactly. And I know I want to be mindful of time here. We're about 2 minutes away at the 45-minute mark. I think what we can do is I just have one kind of closing question to both of you guys. So I guess framing it this way, do you think that crypto will break through the mainstream in 5 years? Yes or no?
Oh man, that's a hard question. If you gave me 20 years, I'd say guaranteed. 5 years, that's only one more cycle away. Like that's,
Totally.
Don't know when the cycle ends. It will end. We will feel as bad as we did in 2018. I guarantee you, but we have to keep the faith, just like we did in 2014. And I mean, I think that's the funniest thing. I was, flipping through Twitter, and someone has been memeing this stuff. They showed the red candles that we've been seeing the past few days, and they're like, totally ironically, is this how the Great Depression felt? And it's like, I mean, and it was a joke, but I think that some people looked at that and maybe they felt like they're newer to the space, so they felt serious about it. And it's like, whoa, guys, like, it's amazing right now, but it's going to be bad again. And then the only people who are actually going to build things of true value will be able to keep building even when it's all red candles all the time, like every single day, like total capitulation.
So I think if it was 10 years out, we are on a path that will achieve what Gary just said. It's kind of like everything will just be part of what you do, kind of like AWS. You don't even think about it's being hosted up there in the cloud. It's just in the background. But 5 years out, there will be two parallel worlds. There will still be traditional people who want more safety and a certain experience in the yields in the traditional products. And then there'll be other people who like the higher yield, more volatile, and more interesting, in my opinion, and less safe world of DeFi higher yields.
Gary,
Yeah.
what about the 10-year adjustment?
Oh man, it's so hard for me to guess. Honestly, like I'll answer with another analogy, which is like think about, VHS. There were still people using VHS when DVDs came out, and then streaming came. And like when streaming came out, like people were still using both VHS and DVD. And so I think that that's true for CeFi to decentralized. I think that will also be true for, even going from Ethereum to, either Ethereum 2.0 or what kills Ethereum 2.0. Either way, the technology, the march continues, and I don't know. 10 years, I hope so. 20 years, I'm certain.
Yeah, Gary makes some great points. I will say though that I see so many smart young people coming into this space, more so than previous cycles in tech. So if that's an indication, it'll be closer to 10 than 20.
Yep.
Awesome. Then seems like everyone has the answer. It's 10 to 20 years when we go mainstream.
Hey man, I mean the number one thing, if people are thinking about devoting their careers to crypto, don't do it halfway. Like don't do
Totally.
it on a 2-year basis. Don't do it on a 5-year basis. You've got to give it 10 to 20 years or don't do it at all.
Great advice. Great advice.
That's a great way to end this segment. And we are at time, everybody. Appreciate everyone joining with Gary and John here. Thanks again for joining us, and we'll have more of these soon.
Thank you guys.
Thank
Such a
you.
pleasure to hang with you all.
Take care. Thank you.